Okay, hello everybody. I am so excited to have Mary Collins here with us today. I've been hounding her now for a couple months for an interview so I could learn more about her. And she's been so busy writing a book about her journey that I waited until she had some time. And so today's the day. And so I just want to jump right into it and say, Mary, thank you so much for doing this with me today. I know you're
Thank
busy.
thank you for inviting me. I'm really excited to do it.
Oh, thank you so much. So, all I know is that you were diagnosed with MS in 1995, and you had decided, I'm not taking the drugs. I'm going to heal myself come hell or high water. And you did it back at a time when holistic healing wasn't really a thing, it wasn't a thing at all. And so, I know how hard it is today to heal yourself, and have people support you. So, why don't we start back in 1995 with the diagnosis and, how you came to decide, oh, hell no, we're healing this.
Well, so I had some kind of unusual circumstances. From 1982 to 1987, I lived with a registered nurse, a BSN registered nurse who had been at the University of Wisconsin in Madison and had been an oncology nurse. And she, through an agency that I worked with helping people with disabilities part-time, reached out and was looking for someone to actually move in with her and provide non-medical assistance with things like driving, bathing, etc. Now she had MS and she'd had it for a few years. She was in her mid-40s when I first started working with her. And so being the kind of person I was already interested in kind of holistic health and things. I started looking into it because all I had was what she told me about her experience. And she had had some surgery for a serious pressure sore. Sometimes when people are sitting in chairs or on hard surfaces a lot and she didn't walk, that developed. And so she had gotten through that, gotten home. And so I started then. And she had a catheter. She needed assistance with suppositories to go to the bathroom. She needed help with bathing. I would transfer her from her bed to her cart, from her cart to her car, drive her to the hospital. And she was also working to be a hospital discharge planner, which in retrospect, I find slightly ironic because of her health condition and mindset, but that's another story. So she was getting her master's in healthcare administration and working. She also smoked cigarettes. She drank pretty heavy alcohol. I mean, not wine or beer, hard liquor, not every day, but fairly often. And she said that diet had nothing to do with it. So she took all of the standard medications, medications for spasticity, steroids periodically, everything that was available in 1995, I think she was taking because she was under the top care of the people at the university. And so during that 5 years that I lived with her, I mean, it was 365 days a year. I really got to observe her. Sometimes I made some suggestions based on things I'd read about getting some exercise, physical therapy, making some dietary changes. She was absolutely opposed to it. So in year 4 of the 5 years that I lived with her, I let her know that I would need to be leaving, at the end of that year, because I was still in my early 20s when I started working with her. I wanted to have a life, and I did not see that going anywhere. So I had that already. When I went in, what happened in 1995 was I was working and I did things that required my vision to be very good. And I had ocular neuritis. I didn't know that. It came on very quickly. And by the morning of the next day, it hadn't resolved. And I realized, okay, I'm going to have to go get my eyes checked. And since I'd worn glasses since 3rd grade, I had a place to go. And I went, and they were very nice. They took me on an afternoon. They're not normally open. And within about a half an hour, they seemed a little nervous and they said, we really need you to go over to the university, to this special ophthalmology clinic, because we really can't help you. And I now know that they were pretty clear. They thought they knew what I had, but they weren't going to say anything. So by the time I got over to the hospital, they were waiting for me. And I had 2 ophthalmology, neurology, cross-trained physicians and their team. And they did various exams into the eye. They also had me look at sheets with color to see if I could discern. And this was only in my left eye. And so again, it was pretty apparent that something was wrong. And they said they thought they knew what was going on, but they wanted me to have an MRI that night at the hospital because I was supposed to travel for a month to Europe the next week. They offered me steroids and I declined. And that was based on my knowledge of them from having lived with someone. They didn't mention MS yet. I don't know if I don't really remember what my thoughts were because things were happening so fast.
Yeah.
But, I got over to the MRI place, nice technician, nobody else is there. I mean, it looked like a sci-fi movie because it was just this white hallway. And he said, have you had one before? And I said, no. And he says, well, it might be a little loud. That was all he told me.
A little loud. Yeah.
Don't move when you're in there.
Yeah.
It was the tube type. So I got in, and at that point, I think all the emotions of the day and everything started to hit me, and I felt like, I was literally in a war zone and being hit by these noises and just trying to stay still.
Yeah.
So I got through that. And then I went home, and the following Monday, I was seen by these two neurologists again. And they were really kind in pushing me because they knew about the trip. So they said, well, we call it probable MS because in 1995, with just the MRI, even though there were lesions all over, some that they thought were current, some that they thought were old, as they described them, old scars. And they showed me that information. They said, then, this is a probable MS situation. You would have to have another symptom for us to make a conclusive diagnosis based on what they were doing then. So I refused the steroids again. And they were, as I said, kind, but somewhat patronizing. And they kept kind of gesturing to this wheelchair that was over there, when you need us, and we'll make an appointment for you when you return from your business trip. So that was that, and I drove home, and the last words I said to them was, I'm going to heal from this.
So you already had it in your mind, didn't you, that this was not something that you even were going to entertain?
Well, when I lived with this woman, and her mother had a stroke at one point, so her mother and her elderly mother and father were also there. So I was also caregiving for them.
Wow.
And I did a fair amount of that kind of thing over the years, and I liked it. But I noticed, sort of behavioral patterns in people who were pretty much resigned to whatever their situation was. And so I remember very clearly saying to myself, if anything like this ever happens to me, I'm really going to handle it differently.
Wow. Isn't that amazing? Do you wonder, like that was put in your path so
Right.
that you had an opportunity to see what the path would look like had you chosen that because of what was going to happen in the future. That was a godsend.
I see it as a tremendous gift. I don't know, where it came from. I consider myself a spiritual person. If somebody else wants to say it was, some kind of divine intervention or whatever, I'm fine with that.
Right.
But it really did prepare me because I had a fair amount of knowledge about MS that the typical person who's never had a family member or friend have it going in had. And I think it really equipped me to be, pretty empowered from the beginning to decline things and to not feel like I had to make an immediate decision either.
You know what, you were so intuitive though, especially for your age, being so young. You were so intuitive because somebody else could have looked at that situation and thought, well, my God, I better get on the medication right away because who knows how much worse this would be without the medication. We go through those thoughts too. So listening to your intuition and that gut feeling of there's a better way. This is not the way God intended this, God or whoever you believe in. Right. This wasn't the way it was intended for my life to go. This is just a hurdle.
Well, at the time of diagnosis, I was 36 and I had been working with a company for 11 years. And I really liked the company. It was a small company. So we had a lot of relationships in the business beyond just working together. But I also really hadn't been happy there for at least a couple of years. And I was kind of stuck. I wasn't making a decision to do something else, probably afraid or, just for whatever reason. And I was under a lot of stress for the months leading up to and not sleeping well, for one of the first times in my life, not sleeping well. And so for me, in the memoir I'm writing, the first title is Awakening by Sledgehammer of the first chapter.
Ah, yes. I call it God's baseball bat. I love the sledgehammer. Yes.
I'm probably not the kind of person that would listen to, the gentle taps and urgings to do something. So I got it, big time. And so from that point on, I really think that the next year was just a journey of a lot of hard work and research and determination and commitment, but also a lot of grace and a lot of gifts. So,
I
again,
love that you said that about the little nudges, because I felt the same way. Before, the baseball bat, God took out his baseball bat and hit me over the head with, MS. There were nudges, and my story is very much like yours, with the 11 years at a job where I love the relationships that you built over that time. Yes, it was quite stressful, but like you, when I got diagnosed, I'm thinking, I can't do both. I can't heal myself and stay at this job. Did you end up leaving the one?
yes, I mean, because I'd been there so long, and had also at one point made an investment which was paid back, in the company. I had, especially with the owner of the company, a really great relationship. And he was frankly terrified because he knew the woman that I'd worked for. We had moved the business from Wisconsin to North Carolina together. None of the staff chose to come, and that was fine. But, that had happened a few years earlier. So he kind of had this idea in his mind that I was going to end up like this person. And so it was obvious that he said, how about I give you 3 months severance, and, you can keep living in the rental property, which was part of my compensation, next to where we are, for 6 months or a year if you need to. And then, he just was relieved because I took it. And I don't think he wanted to be responsible for me. And, again, I had no ill will whatsoever. I understood completely.
Right. Yeah, no one knows what to do in situations like that. That was kind of him to offer that for a year. But my God, you had so much going on. What was one of the first things that you did, if you remember, that was, okay, I need to fuel my body with good food, for me, it was going gluten-free. I eliminated everything and then eventually slowly reintroduced foods back, like the gluten, the dairy, the soy. So after 6 months, 3 months, I introduced things back. And that's when I found out the gluten was the one that really took me down, literally took me down. What was it for you?
Well, remember, I had that sort of odd situation. I had to go to Europe on a business trip.
Right.
And I had to work for 3 weeks. And then I had a fourth week that I had planned as sort of a vacation afterwards. So I was kind of at the mercy of the hotels or the people who were hosting us or whatever. But immediately I thought, I'm not going to eat sweets or desserts. I'm going to try to get as much fresh food as I can. And because this was in Scandinavia, I could get salmon. And I have always had this real affinity for salmon, even though I grew up in the Midwest. It wasn't really available. And so I ate, a lot of salads. I ate some fermented foods, which again wasn't really on my radar, but it was a local thing. And I didn't do dairy. I just had this instinct not to do dairy, and again, not bread, not gluten. So I was probably in a semi-intermittent fast situation during that time, because I was trying to sleep as much as I could so that I could be on for the trade show period of our work from like 8 a.m. to 6 p.m. And then these dinners I had to go to that were part of the association. And, it's a little bit of a blur, but what I do remember is a day or two before the end of the 3 weeks of business, I was leaving the lodging where I was with my business partner and moving on to where I was going to stay for the rest of the time. And I had planned a trip to this place called Turku Castle, which is in Finland. And when I got there, I started noticing, I'm seeing okay, and my balance is okay. And I was in a really dark old building castle, just light coming in from outside. And I thought, well, this is kind of weird. I'm okay. I'm seeing okay. And then one of the displays was on the plague, and everything there was written in English as well as Swedish and Finnish, so I could read it. And it talked all about the plague and, you know, who died and everything else. And this was like one of my other first ahas on about things. Was I felt like this message was trying to tell me some people survived the plague and some people didn't. Why?
Oh, I just got the chills. Okay, so what was the conclusion you came to as to why?
Well, there were certain environmental factors. You know, I didn't think it was genetic. I thought it was, you know, something that they were doing or not doing. And I had, for some reason, a past knowledge, because I had traveled in the south of France many years earlier as a student, that the ports where they had a lot of lavender and they ate a lot of seafood, people did not get as sick. And you know, so that kind of came back in my mind, and I thought, oh yeah, you know, this is that's possible that some people just knew, or their lifestyle or their environment was less conducive for this to be spread, and so they did okay. And so as I walked out of this castle, it was, you know, bright sunshine. It was now late May in Finland, and there had still been snow on the ground when we arrived in late April. And, you know, it was like this bright sunny day, and I walked out and I had to get a taxi and I could see perfectly. And I just felt like, okay, this is it. I'm going to make it. So
And
then I
that's
got,
when you rewrote the program in your mind.
right.
I will be fine. And then when you set that target in your mind, your body just follows what's set in your mind. So your
That's,
body automatically sees the things that are put in your path that are there to heal you, to keep you okay, because you had that knowing, that program, I'm going to be okay.
that's right. Yeah.
You are amazing at identifying patterns. Amazing. To see the patterns, the behavioral patterns from the woman that you were working for and taking care of, the patterns that you saw in the different ports where people didn't get affected by the plague. Through all of your life, it's like the answers were being given to you. And I believe that's true for everybody, but I believe that we're so covered up by whatever it's environmental or family. We're just covered up by, for lack of a better word, shit. And we can't see through to hear the answers. We're never in a quiet space to hear those answers. And you were given the gift of hearing your intuition and translating it beautifully.
Well, thank you. I mean, again, it's something that it is a gift. It's not something that I necessarily cultivated. I did have one other experience on the trip that was kind of interesting. The first day that we landed in Sweden, we were staying with a couple who happened to be in the same profession he was, she was not. And they were nicely hosting us at their kind of rural Sweden home. And then the next day we got in the car and we drove to Oslo, Norway. And on the way, she is an historian. So she's saying, well, over there's a manor house that's a very classic style of architecture. And it was a kind of a farm among wealthier people, and they had a lot of people who worked for them. And I said, oh, how interesting. What did they grow? And she said, flax for linen, mostly. And then they had some cows and they grew vegetables and things. And I thought, oh, okay. So then we get to Oslo, and the next morning, she and I are going to go to visit a few historical sites. And she takes me to kind of a national handicrafts gallery where the Norwegian people who have an opportunity to display and sell knitted items and things like that. But really a beautiful shop. So we get to the door, and of course, everybody speaks English fluently. And she spoke to the Norwegian woman in Norwegian, because everybody in Scandinavia knows 7 or 9 languages. I just admire that tremendously. And, you know, the other lady knew that I was American. So she spoke to us in English. She said, I must tell you, I'm sorry, you know, if you've come here today because you want to see our traditional woolen items, we're not going to have that today because we have a very special exhibit. And we said, well, that's all right. We like crafts. We love this sort of thing. We'll come in. And she said, well, it's all linen and flax woven things. It's very special. We've not had this before. So I started thinking, okay, in 2 days, flax has been mentioned twice. That just kind of filed that away. So then when I arrived back in the United States, you had asked me earlier, what did I do? Well, you know, I got home and I had to rest for, I don't know, 12 hours or something from the trip. And then I had decided to drive to a food co-op natural store because we were kind of in the country, 20 miles out of Chapel Hill, North Carolina. So I drove in and I walked in the door. And in 1995, flaxseed oil was first starting to be marketed for heart health and other vascular health and other things. And here's this big display with little booklets because in pre-internet, people actually are buying little booklets on things and a display and then pointing over to this refrigerated case for flaxseed oil. So I just kind of said, okay, that's a third time that I've heard about this. I probably ought to pay attention. So I probably stood there and read the whole 36-page brochure. It's one of those annoying people in the store standing there. And after I read it, I just, intuitively, I thought, well, based on what they're saying, maybe my omega-3 levels have been low and not in balance. And maybe if I kind of supplemented myself more with that, that could be helpful. So I ended up finding a clerk, found the display in the refrigerated case, bought a cold pressed, I think it was Barlean's brand, flaxseed oil, which was really new at the time.
Yes.
And I started taking a couple tablespoons a day, either on a salad or on food that had cooled. And I want to be clear, I'm not saying that this is what everybody should do. I'm just saying that it was my guidance to do that.
Nice.
And I do think it kind of started something, because I feel, looking back over my life, one of the reasons I crave salmon so much was the omega-3 content. But I probably had some kind of a fat assimilation challenge. I'm not a medical person, so I can't say what form that took, but I had a lot of skin conditions. I seemed to be very vulnerable to athlete's foot. I was a competitive swimmer. Whenever I got stressed, I would, get skin eruptions or a lot of respiratory problems, which I attribute to the dairy and the gluten. So anyway, that was just one example. And after that, I had many of these, what I call 3-hit rule things, where, I would get some a song on the radio, something seemingly random, but it would lead me to something.
I love that, the 3-hit rule. All right, that's the third time I saw it or heard it. I must need it. I love that. I also had the same thing. Sorry?
Of course, you do the research to find out if there's any kind of scientific or medical basis for it.
And of course there always is. After the third hit, you go Googling stuff or reading stuff or looking it up, and all of a sudden you're like, my goodness, thank God I found this. But yet you didn't. It was put in your path. Somebody put that in your path because you needed it. Yeah, I had the same problems with the skin. I was covered. I used to say I looked like Jesus Christ himself because I was covered in eczema and it looked like I had nail holes through my hands. It was so bad. And it got to the point where I didn't have any fingerprints left. A job that I had done about 5 or 6 years ago, we had the fingerprint for the punch-in, and they had to use my ring finger because it was the only one that still had fingerprints on it. That's how bad the eczema was. And as soon as I went gluten-free, all of that healed up. And it wasn't until the last 5 years that my fingerprints actually came back. Yeah.
That's amazing.
Always. And now my daughter is, I want people to be clear. When you decide to heal yourself, it's not, okay, I'm going to do this. Okay, I'm getting a note that my connection is unstable, which sometimes it kicks us off, but we'll jump back on if that happens. Okay. It went away, so we might be good. So my daughter is dealing with skin issues right now. She's 15 and everyone's like, oh, well, it's hormonal. But we took her off gluten and dairy, and it's amazing the difference in her skin already. So yeah, that's what I was going to say. I want people to know that it's not a one size fits all. I love the way you say this is what worked for me, because every body, literally the body, needs something different, and we don't know what we're deficient in. You can take a blood test, you can go, but there's so much more that goes into that. Like you said, you had a problem with fat assimilation. There's no test for that. You have to really be your own guinea pig and listen to your intuition. And so I don't want to interrupt your story though. Did you have more? Because I think there was more in there.
Well, I guess the only thing I want to make sure everybody knows is that seemed like a pretty smooth sailing. Got the oculoneuritis, it resolves itself in 3 weeks. I go get the flaxseed oil. But then things started to happen. I had imbalance issues. I had the fatigue that felt like a couple pallets of bricks were on me at all times. I had series of flu-like symptoms that would be kind of cyclical. And I attribute all that to a detoxing process and, what I think of as things coming up for healing and releasing. And even though I had some information about herbs to support that or, supplements to take, I didn't have something like medical medium
Right.
just there to refer to. I had to keep kind of compiling different information. And I did some fasting for 2 or 3 days at a time. I really couldn't do more than that. But one time, which was about 3 months in, I had a flu situation and vertigo that was so bad and I felt nausea, I felt flu-like symptoms. I had to get to the commode, which was in the adjacent bathroom, and I crawled in there. And I remember my head was so heavy that I really wondered if I would be able to do what I needed to do, and I might crack my head and die, alone, because I was living alone. And so I did got that finished, got back to the bed, and I was just lying there and I said, if there's more for me to do, if I'm supposed to be here and there's more for me to do in my life, I need some help because I'm not, I'm really concerned. And so that night I had, I think the kinds of things you might have with flu, maybe sort of feeling feverish, feeling this, feeling that. The next day I woke up and that was kind of the end of the intensive healing process. So it had been 3 months of up and down to the point sometimes I couldn't drive myself. I'd have to get somebody to help me or pick up things for me. But I never in that time doubted that I was moving toward something. I didn't say, oh, well, these symptoms are unbearable. Let me go get some steroids, or I don't know what I'm doing, so I'm going to give up. I just had this sense that it was part of the process.
Part of the process, there was this trust that what was happening, it wasn't wrong. It was steering you in another direction. Yeah. Yeah. God, so many times I can identify with you when you're sitting there going, I need help. I don't want to give into this. Whoever is out there and listening to me right now, please help me. Show me what I need next.
Right.
And I don't know where that comes from because I wasn't raised religious. I wasn't raised spiritual. It wasn't, nothing of that was ever spoken of, nor did I have an example to watch. So it was just this innate thing inside of me. Can you attribute yours? I'm trying to help other people identify.
Well, I was raised in the Presbyterian Church. My grandmother was the daughter of a Scottish Bible scholar who had come to the United States. So she grew up in that. And she graduated from a Presbyterian college in 1904, which is pretty unusual. So, yes, I was definitely raised in a church environment from baptism right on through. But the way that we did praying there was, I don't know how to explain it, but it wasn't the kind of personal relationship where I felt like I had benevolent, unseen forces out there helping me, or that I was really interacting. It's not that they don't believe in direct communion with God, they do, but just for me personally, I think it was because of all the sort of structure of the church was pretty stoic. We had a lot of certain hymns and certain creeds and certain things that we did, but that just never felt like a personal experience. So, I guess I can't really attribute it to that one way or the other. I just had a sense that there was some kind of universal force that I could communicate with.
Same for me. Same for me. Early on, up until 5th grade, I went to Catholic school, and I never felt like it was a personal relationship. I always felt like I was, I guess one of the sheep, not to say it in a bad way, but I was just, following the crowd, and, God's up here somewhere and we're all down here just trying to listen to him. Yeah, it wasn't until I got sick where that's why I love the sledgehammer, because I say the baseball bat, he had to crack my head open, for me to hear what I needed to hear. And I try to work with people to get them to trust that inner feeling and understand what these programs mean that are running in your head. And that's why I bring Catherine into this, Catherine Rose, the vibrational healer. She works with those programs to help us bring it up to the surface so that we can deal with it. Because I think that's the scariest part. We know the crap that's inside of us and we fear it coming up and us having to deal with it. I remember in my early 20s, I was in a bad marriage and I was so afraid to be alone with my own thoughts. I always had to have the radio on. I always had to be busy. I could never be still and quiet because I didn't know it at the time, but I was so afraid to hear what was going on in my head. And when you're afraid to hear your own thoughts, that's when you're afraid. That's when you can't hear any of your intuition, if you can't even hear your own thoughts. So would you say that, I know it's so cliche and meditation has been given such a woo-woo kind of reputation, but I feel like I don't call it meditation, but I do try to release the things that are bouncing around in my head, whether it's a friend or my husband, get them up and out, and then I can hear the intuition, then I can hear the answers, and then I could sit and ask for them, and then I can hear them. Would you say the same thing?
Yes, I agree. I mean, I would say for me, the other gift of the healing experience was time alone, because I was a definite doer, very programmed to be a doer by my family and by society. That's how you show that you're successful, that you have merit, you work hard. And so I had that downtime and I listened to a wide variety of things on cassette tape or CD, depending
That's,
on.
yep, back in the day, yeah.
And, and I listened to classical music and I read and read and read. And I would say at least 2/3 of what I read was more about spiritual ideas and sort of loving yourself and change. And a lot of that breaking open, as you say, I really look back at a lot of, way back and said, I don't think I've ever given myself permission to be good enough or to love myself, because that just wasn't a message that I got. So, for me, I would say that the first thing was on some level to get rid of the fear, because I said, this is going to heal. It wasn't me doing it. I don't want to sound, egotistical. It was just that I had a faith, what I call an unwavering belief that that would happen. And then I followed everything that I was told. I was just lying there, oh, woe is me, there's an ex machina come down and fix me. I was actively engaged in the process. And then, being willing to look at the stuff, the painful stuff, and say, okay, I'm not afraid of you anymore. I don't have to push you down. I don't have to turn on the radio and ignore you. I'm able to look at it. So that was probably,
Yeah.
that the end of the year. I mean, I started working as a nanny because I had loved working with kids when I was in high school and college, babysitting and over weekends and things like that. So I got a job with a woman who was a single parent, 10-year-old child, went to a private school. So I didn't have a lot of demands during the day. And I knew I could handle, if I needed a nap or something, I could. She knew about my situation. And so, within 6 months, I was working and living there, which gave me, housing, but also gave me some income. And, I just kept getting better and better because I was in, a place that I was happy to be, looking forward to the future.
Yeah, and that's exactly why your story is so amazing. I knew I was going to love talking to you. I just didn't know I was going to love it this much. Our stories are so similar, and I love hearing the way you speak. And I know a ton of other people are going to love hearing your story too. Just such an inspiration that it's all up here. It's all up here and in here, which is why I named my business Minding Your Soul, because I don't believe it's all nutrition. A huge part of it is nutrition, but also a huge part of it is, like you just said, that key word. Those are my words, packing it down. When we pack it down, and just because our head doesn't think about it anymore because we've packed it down either with cigarettes or alcohol or just denial, we pack it down and we think, okay, it's in its place, it's hidden away, locked in a room. But it's not. That negative energy, that awful energy is bouncing around inside of our bodies, causing us to feel sick. And however that manifests, whatever symptoms that manifest, that's the name of our disease that it's given. So the fact that you said you allowed it up and you were in a place where you woke up every day and you were happy and you weren't afraid of your thoughts, how have you ever considered coaching people to do what you did? Because I'm now coaching and getting into this. Okay, listen, I can't show you how to do it, but I can hold your hand and I can give you all the tools that you need to be able to deal with what's going on inside of you. I'll tell you what to eat, but it's not all about that. So
Right.
have you
Yes,
ever
I
thought
have.
about helping people? I mean, your book though, we're going to talk about your book next because I know that's going to help a ton of people.
Well, I have considered it. And so 3 years after I was well, I met my husband of 21 and a half years. And it happens that he also had had a health situation at the same time I did. And so, and there's one little side story. It turns out that I was working as a waitress part-time in all of this, and I waited on him once, but I didn't realize it. And I guess he was with a group of colleagues and they were kind of encouraging him to, ask for my number or something, and he didn't. So another thing, I believe I want people to know that I'm not a fatalist or necessarily a destiny person, but I do think if you are meant to have an opportunity to have an experience or meet somebody or go somewhere and study something or whatever it is you have a dream of, if you for some reason can't do it, that opportunity can come back. I think we're frozen. I can't see your face moving, but I can hear myself talking.
Yes, yes. Whoop, there. Okay, I'm unmuted. Can you hear me? Can you hear me? Oh, you're muted now. You're muted. Okay. All right. So this is going to be in two parts. So I'll just let everybody know that this is part two of the same interview with Mary Collins. Internet connections went bad and we got kicked off. So we're back again. So we'll call this part two. All right. So we were just about to touch on something really important that I wanted to say. Oh, when you said, I loved what you just said about just because you might miss an opportunity the first time, it will always be put back in your path and you do get another chance. So I love that because it gives people such hope. There's no such thing as, oh, I missed my opportunity. No, you always have a chance to start over again. And if it's meant to be in your life, it will keep coming in front of you, or at least in your path somewhere. I love what you said about your husband, because I have a best friend since my job of 11 years that I ended up leaving when I got sick. I met a woman there, Amanda, and we have stayed friends ever since. So I think I was pregnant with my son when I met her, who is 18 and a half now. So 18 and a half years. Well, for the past 5 years, she has, where like, I'll say she started 6 years ago. She kept saying, I really think, you would really like my friend Kevin. And I'm like, oh God, no, I dated a Kevin. I'm not going out with another Kevin. Right. And she never let up. Every once in a while, she'd be like, I saw him again, and I feel like his sense of humor is very close to yours. I'm like, oh, is his name still Kevin? Yeah, then I'm not doing it, Amanda. Stop. So today, my husband is that Kevin. I finally went out with him, and that reminds me of what you said. The universe will keep putting it in your path, because the universe always has your back and will never give up on you and is here to help you.
So I actually was introduced to my husband by my last nanny employer. I ended up doing that for 6 years, and I was with an agency at that point, and it was a part-time position. My husband's an electrical engineer, and she worked on his team. So, I went through the rigorous interview process to help with her baby. And then almost immediately after that, my husband was so excited that she was starting to come into the office, because she'd been, not willing to leave her child. I would work there while she was working in another room. And then she became comfortable with me and said, well, I think I'll go into the office. So he's like, who is this Mary? It's doing this wonderful thing that you come into the office and be calm. And so I guess that started the wheels turning. And so she was determined to fix us up. And I went through a more rigorous process for that than I had for the nanny job, because I had a daughter and, was divorced, and, she wanted to make sure that I was serious and, material that would be suitable, I guess. So.
Of course.
Yeah.
Of course. Yeah. My husband doesn't have any kids, and I have two. So yeah, there's a rigorous process to make sure you are worthy of helping to raise my children. Yeah. Oh, what a great story.
We met in late February of '99. He proposed in May, and we got married in August. And I was pregnant with our son in November. And so we have a 20-year-old son, and then my stepdaughter is 29. And so, I was immersed for all those years in mom and spouse duties, because his career is pretty demanding. And we just made a decision from the beginning that I would kind of be the home-based person. And done a lot of volunteering and stuff that moms do, over the years.
But you were also immersed in love.
Right. And continuing to research, always continue to research about health.
Always. Yeah, it's never ending. You don't just get healthy and say, okay, I'm done. I can do whatever I want now. No. And that's what I tell people. But it's not such a hard thing anymore, because you are healthy. It doesn't, everyone says, oh, you have to do this for the rest of your life. Well, yeah, but you don't mind doing it, and you're your own guinea pig, and you find something new and you try it and you feel even better, and it just becomes part of your life and it becomes fun. So I'm so excited to hear about your book. Can you tell us a little bit about it, or a lot about it?
Well, I've probably thought about writing a book, or tried to start writing a book, at least 5 or 6 times, in this 25 plus year period. And I think now the timing wasn't right. Initially, I realized I don't have medical credentials. I'm not a researcher, a scientist. So how am I going to make recommendations? And I didn't want people to get hung up on that I had 3 tablespoons of flaxseed oil, because again, I don't think that's for everybody. So I waited around in the Best Bet diet. Matt Embry, who was diagnosed the same year I was, his dad and he and his mom developed that. And so I thought, well, that's a good diet that I can recommend to people as an option to start with, because at least it covers all the basics. And then when Dr. Walls came on the scene, I thought, wow, now we're going to get somewhere, because we've got this person who herself has experienced this. She hit the rock bottom point where, nutritional studies as an MD with her own case of MS. And although it's gotten, some awareness, it's not like the blockbuster hit this medical scene. Now every neurologist is walking around carrying a book. No, I hear every day people who are told, well, that's not really credible, or some people have to come on and say she had chemotherapy or she did this or that. Well, I think her own story of her experience is the credible story we ought to listen to. And it is that all those things make it worse. So
I agree. I could not believe after Terry Walls came out that the entire world didn't say, okay, she's a doctor. She was at rock bottom in a zero gravity wheelchair. I can't believe that we're still talking about medication for MS. I know. I felt the same way. Each time something new came out, I too felt, this is it. The world's going to know you can heal.
right.
But now we're still chipping away at it.
So I did, it became really clear to me that what I need to do is write a memoir, which is really telling my story and sort of trying to maybe inspire people. I don't know if you've ever read the book Feel the Fear and Do It Anyway by Susan Jeffers.
I just, oh, that's my second one. There you go. See? Yes, I haven't read it yet, though. No.
She has passed away some time ago, but I believe she was a psychologist by training, but she was based in the UK and had a tremendous following of people who learned to do kind of her approach. But I had read so many books like that, but I think hers is the one that always comes to mind, of a very personal story. She's not coming at it and saying, I have a doctorate in psychology and I'm going to tell you how to fix your thought process. Instead, it was her own personal struggles, many really challenging circumstances, from early childhood on, and using that as a way to show you how you can learn to say, I'm going to feel that fear, but I'm going to do it anyway, and specific techniques.
Yeah.
So that's really what my book is about. And so it's called Epiphany, My Story of Healing MS from A to Z. And each chapter starts with the first chapter is Awakening by Sledgehammer. And, that was just a simple way for me to say, I've got to have 26 chapters and I have to have a title. And so I'm going to work with that.
That's great. That's so smart. It's fantastic. I can't wait to read it, because you're so right in that we don't have medical degrees. We're not researchers. We're just common, average people, and we had this knowing that it was all going to be okay and we could do it. And I love what you're doing right now for else. You're letting them know that this is possible no matter who you are. You don't have to be a doctor. You don't have to know what you're doing. You just have to trust yourself and trust your inner guides, that they'll show you whatever you need will come into your path. So deal with your crap.
Right.
Let it up and out so that you can hear those and see those answers.
So I'd like to share one other thing. My interests over this period of time have really, I did the spiritual thing. I actually took courses through an accredited seminary program. I thought that I was going to want to do that. And then things happened and I said, no, that's not for me, but I didn't lose anything I got out of that. We did a lot of courses in pastoral care and counseling and that kind of thing. But I've always been interested in regenerative agriculture. I didn't necessarily call it that, but I have been. So for years, I've subscribed to produce direct from a farmer who grows organically. And so now I volunteer at a community garden that's about 20 minutes from us. And they have a couple of for-profit farmers who work in connection with it. So they sell produce in various ways, microgreens, mushrooms, but they also do workshops. And they allow people to come there and harvest and volunteer, and then they can take food. Because it's a nonprofit, their mission is to help the food insecure as well as everything else. So I think most of us will probably have some kind of experience where when we go through this kind of thing, you say, wait a minute, a lot of things I was told or taught were okay. It's kind of like going down the rabbit hole, okay, wait a minute, that's toxic and that's not good. For me anyway, I've had enough time now where I can look at it and say, well, yes, I wanted to protect myself, but it wasn't just enough for me to go to some health food store and get something that's safe for me. I'm concerned about my children. I'm concerned about everybody's health. So I want to do something to try to make alternatives available. and to kind of get people out of the mindset that they have to buy into, all of this sort of capitalization and consumerism of life, and realize that there's really something else out there.
And that they do have choices. There's always a choice. You don't have to buy into anything. If you don't feel it's right, you don't need a reason. It's not right to you. Don't do it. You have choices.
Right. I love when you.
So I love this work that you're doing. So when does your book get released?
Well,
Say that again.
I love when you say the word no, knowing, because that's really, recently become more comfortable saying that. I've always had something that somebody would call kind of clairsentience, which is a kind of a form of intuition where you just know something. But that's
right.
that I really kind of want people to know about me, and also know about themselves. When you know, you know. And, for years, I would have gone to somebody with a pile of data or information and said, now this is why it's okay to do this, or this is why this worked for me. And I finally just have come to a point where I don't have to prove anything to anybody. And then that makes you more open to information coming. So anyway.
Exactly. But no, that you bring up a really good point, because there is socially accepted knowing, and then there's everyone, the people who think, oh, well, you're like witchcraft, voodoo, that's like the other end of the spectrum. But think about mother's intuition. Think about when you have a knowing that your child needs you, right? And your milk is let down when you're breastfeeding. That's a knowing. You're connected to your child. A knowing that, oh, my child needs me. And you make a phone call and find out, in fact, they need you to pick them up immediately because they're in a bad situation. That's all socially accepted knowing, right? Mother's intuition, okay. I woke up in the middle of the night, didn't hear a thing, but I woke up and something was wrong. And I go to the other end of the house where my daughter's bedroom is, and she's puking by her room. How did I know that? I just knew it was my intuition. Someone said, taps me on the shoulder and went, Janine, your daughter needs you. She's in the bathroom. But that's all socially accepted because it's your child. But I believe that intuition happens every day, all day, but we brush it off, we blow it off, and we don't trust it. But when it comes to our child, whether we trust it or not, we're going to go see if that's true. We're going to go see if they need help. So you're right. It's getting people to understand that they can trust their intuition. First, they have to hear it. They have to face the fear. I can't wait to read that book, because like you said, the rule, and so I'm sure it's coming up again. Not to say that I'm going to wait till the third time before I buy the book, but you have to face your fear and trust.
My plan is to make the book available as a download. And so I have written most of all of the chapters now, but I, of course, need to go through an editing process and sort of step away from it. But I've made a commitment to myself that I'm not going to overthink it.
Good luck with that. I always find it very difficult.
We're just going to decide it's ready. Well, I've got a couple people reading that I really trust, and they're giving me great feedback, and so I'm pretty confident.
Well, I wanted to let you know, you are more than welcome to advertise the book. You can advertise the shit out of it in Minding Your Soul. I think everybody needs to hear your story and be inspired by what you've done in your life.
And you mentioned coaching earlier, and I would say that I love coaching. I actually have a woman that is a certified yoga instructor and a life coach that I work with, and I recommend it to people. I have done counseling, therapy over the years, and I didn't get the same benefit out of it as I get out of coaching. But I'm not sure that that's the path for me. One of my insecurities has always been this sort of what I call credentialitis, which was the idea that if I didn't have the right credentials, then I couldn't do something or say something. And I really want to empower people to realize that, if you're an intelligent, discerning adult, you have just as much empowerment as anybody, that these titles that we put on people don't make one person better or smarter than you. So maybe we'll get there, but unfortunately I have ways to work with this information locally to try to help people who maybe want to improve their quality of life to start thinking about getting these regenerative foods and, it's sort of just getting into a whole nother community. And so that's another part of what I want to do.
Well, I hope you do go into coaching, because I feel like when you're learning to ride a bike, you don't want someone teaching you how to ride that bike who's never ridden a bike before, but they read the manual and they went to school to learn how to do it from a manual, right? No,
Right.
you want someone who is going to say, hey, I've been there before. I know what you're going through, and here's not to fall off the bike. Here's how you do it. So that's what I have learned in my coaching when I talk to people, because I had that same fear. I'm not a doctor. Who the hell am I? Well, I'm someone who's done it before, and I can identify with what you're going through. So when you decide that you want to start coaching, because I think you probably have a lot on your plate right now with your book, which I can't wait to read. When you decide that you do want to go coaching, let's talk, because
Okay.
I would love to keep the wheel turning. I'm one person and I'm not going to be here forever.
Right.
So I want to make sure that this information, the wheel starts turning and we start infecting more people. And the more coaches we have out there teaching people how to do it or inspiring them that it can be done, the more we'll get that information out to the people who need it.
I agree. And in the last few months, I've met you and I've met a couple other people, and there's a real spirit of collaboration too. So I do have a degree in business. I mean, a lot of times I've seen people be very competitive and kind of, this is my method, this is my brand, my technology, this is how I want to do it. And, I think that the more people that we can show, okay, here are all these different individuals that came to a somewhat similar process through their own journey, that
Right.
adds credibility.
Right.
Then the person can say, well, I guess I can't deny it anymore, that this is possible. And that, one person might be more appropriate for somebody to work with and another for whatever reason. And
I was just going to say that personality wise, they might not like one person the way they like another person, but yet not be able to tell why. I just resonate with this person better,
that's
you
right.
know? And one person doesn't have all of the information. So you're going to resonate with somebody who has what you need, whether or not you know it. You're just going to be drawn to them because they have what you need.
That's right. That's absolutely, yeah.
Yeah.
So I would say that the target for, in addition to the book, I'm also wanting to do, now this sounds kind of strange, but kind of a performance art piece of it, where I'm going to do an audiobook, and then my son, who's a musician, and a musician friend of his, who's actually been his instructor for 11 years at the music school where they work, have wonderful facilities. So I'm going to record there, and then there'll be some original music and some sampling and other things with it.
I
So
love that idea. That is a wonderful idea.
sometimes when your energy level isn't good, you need to have it kind of wash over you. I'm a very auditory learner, and I listen to a lot of books on Audible that if I had to sit down and stop doing something and read, I wouldn't get to. So I wanted to make this. So I think my target is probably, no later than September or so, that things are going to be ready to be released.
I can't wait. I can't wait.
Off, but I'm just trying to deliver on the promise.
I think you're going to do great. And I think that audiobook is such a good idea, because I'd say things. There's so many times where I've worked to do on the computer and it's mind numbing. And, you put your headphones in and you listen to a book, or while you're driving. I hate the radio. The radio is awful. So I put a book in my ears and I listen, or while I'm cleaning the bathroom, to stop thinking about the fact that I'm cleaning the bathroom.
For people who are experiencing, say, a lot of fatigue or whatever, and maybe they do have to be in bed or they have to be somewhere resting, put this on and absorb the material, even though you're not. And again, that's for anything, any book. But of course, I hope to have a few of mine sold.
Oh, it's definitely going to sell. It's definitely going to sell. And like I said, we're going to advertise the crap out of it and Minding Your Soul and get that word out, because everyone needs to hear more stories of healing. All of these stories, it's just going to help people understand that this is a normal thing. People are doing this. It's just not advertised. And here we are, the little people, we don't have big commercials, and we don't, thank God you're doing a book. You're going to reach so many more people, but it's going to be huge, and it's going to take people like me and you just continuing to get that word out.
Someone you and I both know, who's, his goal is to get 10,000 people. And I think that's a great thing because there's strength in numbers.
Yes.
If somebody is going in, let's just say to a neurology appointment, and they say, I know of 10,000 people who have been doing something different than what you're telling me to do, and they're doing well. And it's going to be harder, I think, again, I don't believe in fighting against anything or anybody, but it's going to be harder to deny the results that people are experiencing when people know about each other. And they're not isolated and being told by a physician, oh, well, that's one case, one book, one situation. So that's something I'm really excited about, because you can imagine back in 1995, I mean, I didn't have the internet, I didn't have a computer, I was completely isolated. And I think about a year later, I talked to maybe 100 people in a year who either had a friend who had MS or they had MS or whatever. And 2 of the 100, I kept this data in mind, 2 of the 100 actually even pursued it at all.
Wow.
And it was too hard.
So you didn't have any evidence that you're knowing of you're going to be fine. You had no evidence that that was actually going to happen.
Right.
And yet you still trusted that. Now that's trust. That's faith. That's faith.
Right.
My God. And that's what we need to show everybody. I want to thank you so much for taking this time. I know you're so busy with the book, and you still took this time out for me and the group and to show everybody that it's possible. Thank you so much.
Well, it is a pleasure, and I'm so happy to know you genuinely love what you're doing. I had the opportunity to listen in on one of your recent groups. I was very impressed with what everybody was saying.
Thanks.
So, the authenticity that you're putting out there, I know that we can all hear that, and I'm just grateful for doing it.
Oh, I appreciate you saying that so much. Thank you, because it is authentic. There's nothing fancy about this. I'm in my bedroom. You can see my dressers, and it's just getting the information out there. And maybe one day down the road, I'll be fancy about it, and I will have that. But for right now, I think people may trust more just to see an average person, living her life, raising her kids, shushing them as they open the door because I'm on a Zoom. I appreciate that. Thank you. So with that, I'll say goodbye, and hopefully we'll do this again real soon. Maybe after the book release, we'll do another one. We'll talk about the book, and we'll get it sold.
Okay. Thank you so much, Janine.
All right, Mary. Thank you so much. Have a great day, and we'll talk soon.